Greetings, everybody. It is the 3 o'clock Eastern Time, and I'd like to welcome you to today's AT3 webinar, Partnering with Your State or Territory and Local Education Agencies. Next slide, please. Next. Thank you, Jamie. Just a few reminders, please. In order to see captions at the bottom of your screen, please click on the CC button in the control panel. The previous slide, please. Our presenters for today are Tobias Orr, the Director of the Nebraska Assistive Technology Partnership, and David Baker, Director of the Missouri Assistive Technology Program, and Janice Carson, Director of the Idaho State AT Program. Please enter any questions or comments that you might have in the chat window at the bottom. Comments will be addressed at the conclusion of the panel discussion, but we have also planned in 3 logical question points at the end of each speaker. For upcoming events, please check in at the at3center.net events page for registration links to upcoming webinars and presentations. Additional invitations will be sent out on the AT3 listserv. And as always, please complete the post-webinar surveys when you receive them, and we especially are interested in knowing about relative topics that you would like to see the AT3 Center address in the future. Next slide, please.
I believe this is me then, Dave.
Go ahead, Tobias. Thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Tobias Orr. I'm the Director of Nebraska's AT program, the Assistive Technology Partnership. And I've been asked today just to talk about ATP's working relationship with Nebraska Department of Education's Special Education Program. So next slide, please. Wow. So over the last few years, we've actually had a partnership with special education for probably going on almost 20 years now. But the last 2 to 3, we've restructured the program, made quite a few changes, quite a few improvements, just so we can better serve the students in Nebraska. Next slide, please. So the purpose of our program is we're providing services to IEP and IFSP teams throughout Nebraska who are working with students and children birth to age 21 who are receiving special education services. In the end, all decisions made by the IEP or IFSP teams are on the team, not on us. We're just there to provide technical assistance, training, and also equipment for the teams to use with the children. Next slide, please. The vision, really what we're trying to do is build capacity across the state. We feel that a lot of the teachers are not comfortable with assistive technology, so therefore they're not writing it into IEPs, they're not writing it into IFSPs, and so our goal really is to get enough information out there and get teachers and professionals working with students comfortable with AT, or at least comfortable enough to know, to ask the right questions so that they start to consider it in IEPs and IFSPs. Next slide, please. So the 3 services we provide to student or professionals in Nebraska is technical assistance, training, and then we also have our statewide AT loan pool. Next slide, please. Technical assistance, this could be anything from phone calls, emails, online videos via Zoom, basically we're supporting IEP and IFSP teams in finding potential AT solutions. We also, every time an item is loaned out of our loan pool, technical assistance is offered. We do follow-up emails throughout the loan just to make sure that there's any questions or needed training or whatever they may need, that we're there as there to offer assistance. Next slide, please. So training, basically what we're trying to do is teach school personnel how to consider AT, conduct an AT assessment, acquire and provide AT tools and systems, how to implement AT effectively, and then how to evaluate that effectiveness. Next slide, please. We're doing this through, right now we have a webinar series. I think this year we're putting out roughly 40 or 50 webinars. We've just last year started contracting out with experts in their area or their fields to help put these webinars together. Our staff does some of them, but the majority of them will be done with contracted speakers. Next slide, please. New thing this year, so we put together what we call an AT cadre, and it's an intensive training program for 8 months. We have 21 participants this year, which is exciting because we slotted for 20, but we had enough applicants, so we ended up sliding some money around the budget and got enough room for 21. These individuals, a lot of them are teachers. I think there might be some speech paths. They're all school personnel. We're giving them individualized coaching. We also have access to the ATIA Learning Center and Closing the Gap membership for each of them for the full year. We actually ended up getting a discount or a membership with ATIA to where anyone in Nebraska can actually access that learning center. We also partnered with a local college to offer optional graduate credit for anybody that completes the program. So that was another incentive for people to join in. Next slide, please. Our loan pool, this year we did make a change. We did separate it out from our regular state loan pool. So we changed the address and put education in front of it. So we were having some issues in the past where individuals, just general citizens, were trying to access equipment that was purchased through special education funds. And so we could not loan it to them. So to remedy that, we went ahead and split the education loan pool out. And basically we do 60-day loans to IFSP IEP teams at no cost to them. The purpose of it, of course, is to assess for potential AT solutions and also a short-term loan while waiting for a student's existing AT to be repaired or replaced. Next slide, please. Let's see, we do some extensions on the 60-day loans, but it's a case-by-case basis. We ask the schools if they are going to ask for an extension, basically they have to give us some kind of a justification. We do ship equipment. Nebraska is a very large, very rural state. We do have offices across the state, but there's no way it'd be cost effective for us to deliver or for them to come pick it up. So all of our equipment is housed in one location in the center of the state. And so we have it in our budget to ship it there and back. So a return label is sent with the equipment to the school. Next slide, please. Funding for this. So special education, they pay us with IDEA funds. Part C covers the birth to 3 and Part B is kids age 3 to 21. We do an 88% B and a 12% C split. We keep an eye on that. That's pretty much where it's been for quite a few years, but we have the option if we start noticing a lot more Part C services going out, we could change that percentage around, trying to make sure we're using the funds for the audience that they're intended for. Also in our annual budget, we do have funding every year to increase or replace items in our statewide AT loan pool. Next slide, please. And here's the history of it. So in Nebraska, special education started out with a diagnostic center located in the center of the state. What would happen is kids and their families would be brought to this diagnostic center for a week at a time to assess them for AT needs, training them on AT and how it can be used in the school. This turned out to be a very expensive model. And I heard the numbers once and I can't remember what exactly it was, but we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to serve a couple dozen kids maybe. So ATP took over the contract, and for a lot of years what we did is we'd get a grant from special education and then we'd award that funding out to 5 education service units across the state. So we had it broken up into 5 regions. This was okay. It did its job for a long time, but what we found was we weren't seeing consistent services across the state. We were also seeing that Nebraska has, I think there's 19 education service units, but we found that the 5 that we were granting to, even though they had a large region, their ESU or their unit was getting a lot more services than say the surrounding ESUs. So 2 years ago, we brought all the activities in-house. We do still contract out for the loan pool, the storage of it, just because it was more convenient to keep that where it was. But the reason we did this for quality control, so now we know that a consistent message is being given to all the educators across the state. Since we're not using a regional model anymore, there's no preferential treatment, and then also more strategic use of funds. So with the regional model, the issues we were having was each one of the 5 regions, a new piece of AT would come out and they'd all want one. And so funding was used to buy 5 smart pens or whatever it may be. Well, those 5 smart pens might each get loaned once in 12 months. So now since it's one loan pool for the whole state, we're only buying the equipment that we actually need. So that stretches our dollars a lot further and leaves us more money to fund more equipment for the students. Next slide, please. So services during COVID-19, how has this affected Nebraska? We did have a lull in loans right at the beginning of the school year. Requests slowed way down. Pretty much what it was, the teachers were trying to get their feet underneath them with the whole teaching remote and the COVID-19 pandemic. Once they got a handle on it, though, we started seeing the requests ramp up quite quickly. We're seeing an increase in need for technical assistance surrounding remote learning, which could have been guessed. And our trainings, though, are still taking numerous forms. We're still doing online. We still do face-to-face on occasion. Right now, that's probably not happening as much. And we're still offering courses throughout the year. Next slide, please. And let's see, services during COVID. So logically, more emphasis now is being put on webinars and online training. That's really where the push for the ATEP webinar series came from, just because we can't do as many presentations and trainings in person as we used to. We also started a newsletter last year to promote AT and ATP Ed services. Before the pandemic, we had our presence at almost every single statewide and regional conference in the state. All of those getting canceled, we were having a hard time really getting the message out to the educators. So started a newsletter. We also put a real-time chat feature on our website. So if a teacher or anybody working with a student has just a quick question, there's somebody always monitoring that during business hours, so they can just jump on the website and shoot us a question and we'll get right back to them. We're also building some more features into our website, such as a blog, resource library, and we're enhancing our calendar on our website. So just making our services more accessible to people across Nebraska. And next slide, please. Oh, and that's it. I guess any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So we have a couple questions, Tobias. Angela Standridge in Texas is questioning the 88-12 split for funds, but anyone from either program can check out any tool?
Yes, so we don't differentiate when we buy equipment. So Part B pays 88%, Part C pays their 12%. And so we don't differentiate. I guess we don't drill it down that far. So the 88-12 split's pretty consistent by how many students we're serving. So how many requests for technical assistance and training from individuals serving the 3 to 21 compared to those serving birth to 3. So that's kind of where that split came from. But each piece of equipment we buy, we do the split similarly. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. And then Molly Kimmel asks, can you provide more detail on the curriculum for the 8-month training program for the AT cadre? Is this staffed or run by your AT program, or do you have partners for the education from the education department?
So we staff it, so it is run by us. So we have Dr. Brian Wojcik. I know a handful of you know him in the AT community. So he actually runs the program for us. And he's an educator himself. So he put the curriculum together. He also worked with Wayne State College to make sure that it met their standards so that they could get master's level credit for it. But yes, we developed that ourselves. And if anybody's interested, I can talk to Brian and see if we can't get some of that sent out to you guys.
That appears to be all the questions for now. So let's advance and invite David Baker from Missouri to speak to us.
All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. So what I kind of want to talk to you a little bit, let's advance the slide, please. While we're waiting for that slide to advance, what I'm going to focus in on here is Missouri's Assistive Technology Reimbursement Program specifically. Let's move on to the next slide, please. All right, well, that's in process. Let me give you a little bit of background on our overall relationship with our Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, which is we are actually housed within Missouri state government and under the umbrella of our Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. And that's kind of an interesting relationship because we do a lot in conjunction with our Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, and in particular the Division of Special Education, but we also operate pretty freely in terms of a lot of our activities. And so we partner with them when it's a common mission, and then kind of do our own thing with school districts when it is not sort of a shared initiative. So we provide a number of supportive roles to school districts throughout the state of Missouri. And in 2002, we created the ATR program, which is now in its 18th year. And if you go back, please, a couple of slides to the one that says ATR program, I'll kind of walk people through how the program works. Okay. Okay, so just to kind of the brief parameters of the program and how it operates. First of all, it's open to any Missouri public school, public charter school, and then we still have a system of state schools throughout the state of Missouri. And so that's approximately 500 plus school districts around the state that are eligible to apply for the program. And the qualifiers on the program are essentially that it is a student that has an IEP, and that IEP includes assistive technology, and the assistive technology that's being requested through the program generally falls between $500 and $5,000. So we will consider items that make total sense for a student that are below $500. And if it's an item that's above $5,000, we'll still consider reimbursing for those. However, we have to make a deal with the school district that essentially says, hey, school district, this is a $5,050 device. If you pick up that extra $50, we'll do the $5,000. And then it's kind of foolish for a school district to turn down that deal. So every fall, usually about the middle of August, we put the word out through a number of different avenues that we are taking applications for the current school year. And the school districts then are able to submit their applications. There's no limit to the number of applications a school district can send in. And then we will review that application. And it's a fairly labor-intensive process for the review. If we have questions about the application, we obviously follow up the school district. We have a lot of desire, and it only makes sense to kind of really go over these with a pretty fine-tooth comb to make sure that those dollars are being spent wisely on those students, that the school district has done its due diligence. One of the things that we ask school districts to do is to actually have conducted a device trial or gotten an evaluation. In other words, not just be picking things thinking they're going to work for a kid, but have some data behind why it was that they selected the devices that they are applying for. So once we have reviewed the application and we have decided that it's a solid application, we will notify the school district. And then they have approximately 90 days to follow up with us to provide proof that they have actually purchased that assistive technology that we approved that we approved on their application. Once they have provided us with that proof, which is generally invoices, then we will turn around and we will reimburse them for the amount that they were reimbursed for. So generally, we will cover all forms of assistive technology through this program. We'll also cover the occasional iPad or laptop because the school district already has a subscription to some app or some software program. They just need a tool for a particular child. We'll even do licenses for school districts as long as they're tied to a child. And when we do those licenses, we obviously are maximizing the number of students that can benefit from that form of assistive technology. We don't do durable medical equipment. And then sometimes there's a real fine line between what kind of fits under the term more of an occupational therapy type of tool in a school or an educational software versus what we'd call an assistive software. So, it's pretty cut and dry, but there are these little gray areas around the edges every now and then with the types of things that we'll fund through this program. The bottom line is, are we funding something that helps students be able to access the curriculum and achieve and sort of honor that goal or that assistive technology that was in the IEP. So funding has varied a little bit from year to year. Some years it's been a little bit more, some years it's been a little bit less, but generally we receive about $500,000 per year to operate this program. And in most years, that $500,000 has been gone shortly after the holidays. We kind of operate it as a first come, first serve program, but we do have obligations to spread it out across the state, geographically speaking, in terms of different school district sizes, those types of things. But we've never had a problem spending the full amount every year. A couple of things about the program, and we can move on to the next slide. A couple of things about the program that are really, really nice, and they sort of dovetails nicely with some of the other programs that we operate here, is that it ties into our loan program. And as a result, because we require school districts to have a device trial, and so a lot of districts will, in the process, borrow devices out of our ETC program, which is our device loan program. It also helps us connect better with school districts overall, because you just start establishing these sort of long-term relationships with key people within various school districts, where they feel much more comfortable with calling about questions they might perceive as being silly, or if they don't have an understanding of a particular type of assistive technology. As we develop these relationships with them over the years, it helps us do other things that will benefit other students or their district in general. So last year, through the ATR program, we received applications for 287 students from 86 different school districts, and then 3 state schools. There's approximately 500 and some school districts in the state of Missouri. So even when we have a really good year, which is, I consider 2019, 2020, it still amazes me the number of school districts that do not apply for the program. And we hear a variety of interesting reasons why that might be. Of that 287 students, we were able to fund 245 from 82 different school districts plus 3 of the state schools. And a total of 490,000 plus was then allocated to assistive technology. In terms of disability categories that were most funded through the program, students, and these are the IDEA categories that we use to kind of track that information. Students with autism and then students with visual impairments were the 2 largest disability groups that we provided assistive technology for last school year. And it's very interesting to me because visual impairments, those students have been the highest in terms of number of applications for as many years back as I can remember. I don't know what that says, other than the fact I think that's kind of interesting, because it ties in with the second bullet from the bottom there, which are the AT categories, because they have consistently always been the highest number of devices or total amount of dollars in assistive technology has gone to students with visual impairments. So it's become a critically valuable source of funding for those students in particular who, in terms of assistive technology, they have some pretty costly devices that are going to benefit them. And then again, no surprise, the second group of AT devices that are most often requested are going to be speech communication devices. And then I kind of touched on that last bullet point. I mean, we've got a pretty good, set of standards on either end, but we try to be creative with how we use these dollars so that we can benefit as many students as possible across the state. As more and more of these software programs, especially the text-to-speech software programs, like Read and Write Gold or Snap and Go, those types of things, as they go more and more to a licensing type of model, then if we can tie those types of technologies to a particular student who has it in their IEP, then we encourage school districts to go ahead, because it makes more sense to buy just a site license, and then they can open it up to how many students they have that might benefit from that. So we actually end up in the course of a year serving a lot more students through this program than we actually count. If you can go move to the next slide. If I have a next slide, I don't think I have a next slide. So stop there. I thought I had one more slide, but if anybody has any questions, I'm certainly, looking forward to them. I didn't see anything in the chat, but maybe Dave, you caught something.
Yes, David, there's a question from Lisa Labbit. She asks, wouldn't the leadership or administrators set the tone for teachers or families to be able to access your program equitably?
We would hope so. There are some administrators in school districts that I know that the minute that the word hits the street, they are telling all their people, look, the application is out there, go for it. Then we have parents who we make aware of the program who go to their administrator, and their administrator just blinks at them. And we provide all the school districts the same information, key people in each of the school districts on a yearly basis. So, there's some interesting issues and wrinkles out there.
And then also Angela Stanbridge asks, she says AAC devices plus mounting often goes for just over $5,000. Do you count that as two separate items and then fund?
Yeah, we could do the device and the mounting system, and yes, I think, I can't remember, sometimes when we count the number of devices, sometimes we would count that as two. Sometimes some of the little peripheral devices we don't count, we just count the primary one. So but we would, that would be a perfectly fine application, and it makes all the sense in the world. And actually, when we do the follow-up with school districts, sometimes they forget to put mounting systems, and we call them and suggest that they maybe reconsider based on what we're reading in the application. So.
Well, that's all the questions we have right now. So Jamie, if you'd advance the slide, please, we'll move on to Janice Carson from Idaho.
Good afternoon. Go ahead and advance the slide for me. Thank you. So when I was thinking about doing this, I actually thought of if you give a mouse a cookie. And the reason I thought that way was because to prepare for this, the first thing that I wanted to add was how long have we had a contract with our State Department of Education Special Ed Division? And I was thinking it was 2004. So I went to our file cabinets and I started pulling contracts. I wanted to see what was in each one from before I was the director. And we started in 2001. And it was really an interesting contract at that point. They kind of made me giggle for a while because they're so different than what they are now. But in 2001, for those of you who have been around for a while, our dear friend Ron Seiler, who was the director, he wrote a contract and a proposal for AT training, technical assistance for teachers, and then and then also to develop an AT guide. And the contract was for $33K. And so that was the beginning relationship between Ron and the State Department of Education and the director there. Then in 2002, he added the next level. It's a state level assessments or student level assessments to go out and provide supports to the LEAs. And so he did everything else, plus he added that. So then it popped up to $55,000. Well, the next one is that kind of if you give a mouse a cookie concept. He then added an AT conference. And so that was even a little bit more money of $60K. Then the conference, of course, in 2004, this makes total sense to me, understanding IDEA. became an AT secondary transition conference, and state level funded at that point for $60K. In 2005, he added, there was development of web-based learning community, which we still have, the Idaho Training Clearinghouse. And then to support Idaho ATPs with some training, and as well as update their AT guide for education. And so that was $90,000. And then in 2006, it maintained $90,000. They printed the guide, and they started an AT training lunch series in rural districts. This was fascinating. This in the rural districts, we have a lot of rural areas in Idaho, and so the AT specialist at that time would go out and do a training on the lunch hour and hit the schools in that rural area, in the rural areas. And so the teachers and the administrators could come down during their lunch hour for little breaks and participate. That particular activity, they were also doing the consultations or the assessment. Doing that activity doubled by the next year their number of requests for assessments. It was quite successful. I thought that was quite brilliant, and told my ed coordinator, I think we're going to re-implement that because it was a fabulous activity. So then there was a bit of a sea change. So I want to talk about that moving forward. So these are the first 5 years. Next slide, please. The sea change, so we went from 90,000 to 100,000. The sea change at this point is that I started at the State Department of Education as the monitoring coordinator, the quality assurance coordinator, and I had an AT background as a special ed teacher. I was on our AT team in a fairly large school district, and I was also working on my ed specialist in assistive technology from UNLV, and so when I started I started as a regional position and then moved to the State Department of Ed. And in 2007, I was at the State Department of Ed, and I was liaison for assistive technology, of course, with the background that I had. And so we just kind of maintained. I then became the liaison for the grant with the AT project. And I would use terminology often such as pennies on the dollar. The work that's coming out of our AT project is a plethora of work, and we're paying pennies for it comparatively to the quantity and the quality of work that we're getting. It was a really good line. So in 2007, they maintained about 100K, giving this to Ron Seiler, the AT director at that point. In 2008, they added AAC camp for $100,000. They negotiated. I wasn't quite in the process of negotiating at that point because I was developing our monitoring program, so didn't quite get in on the negotiations that year. But I was able to amend the contract for $30,000. And the reason I did that is because it was time to beef up their lending library. They'd never asked for funds to do that. And so I implemented that when I was a coordinator. In 2009, we continued. You can see what happened was when I amended the contract, Lester, our contracts person, he said, it really irritates me to do these amendments. And I said, oh, Lester, I totally get that. Let's just include that money in their regular contract for right now, from this point forward. So then we went to $140,000 for the contract the following year, and it included that line item for equipment. And then I also was able to grab $225,000 to really beef up the lending library. Let me tell you a little secret for those of you who have not worked at the State Department of Ed. Their funding, because it's DOE, is just like our funding. So they get it and they have 2 years to expend it. And they are typically running, they typically will run about 8 to 9 months in, before they start their funding. They go into almost the second year before they start using the funds. And what happens is, that's through the end of September, right? So what they find out is they're giving money out at a state level on the state calendar. So they do funding July 1st to the end of June. So by the end of June, May and June, they know what money they have. They have some funding left over, and they have to use it very, very quickly because it has to be accounted for and spent, right? Because they're running off that second year funding. And so we had basically there was a lot going on during that time, and we had a lot of money coming back from our LEAs, our local education agencies. And so I was able to grab 225. They needed it used, so I flew up to Moscow to visit with Ron and his education coordinator, and I said, I need it spent yesterday. And so they developed a little budget, we amended, and they were able to really beef up, like I said, beef up their lending library. And then from 2010 to 2015, we stayed fairly level funding at 180,000. I became the AT director in the spring of 2011. In 2016, we had a particular director. The special ed director, we had a new special ed director about 2015, 2016, about 2015. And this special education director was a good friend of mine who I worked with when I worked at the State Department of Ed, Charlie Silva, Dr. Silva. And I said, I need an education rep on my AT council. And I was having a hard time with the previous director. And to get the education rep, it was very off and on. And so she said that she would do it. So she's my AT rep, or my education rep, which is absolutely fabulous. And Charlie is a huge advocate for assistive technology. And at that point, we took at our USED, we had the ATTA, the assistive technical assistance, which had been those little budgets that grew. And then we had a behavior one that we did, and we had the Idaho Training Clearinghouse. We had lots of different little contracts. She wanted it rolled into one, and there's also, she wanted it rolled into one, and it was called SESTA, the Special Ed Technical Assistance. And so it's about a $1.3 million grant that we get. And there's also our partners in Boise State in Boise area also have a grant as well. So she also bought out part of my contract per se. I do AT, but I also do a little bit of other stuff. I was able to add staff. It was a pretty big bump in funding, and our scope of work is quite large now. So our scope of work are things such as there's no cost for technical assistance and support for the school districts. We haven't charged them for years, including borrowing equipment. We have the Idaho Training Clearinghouse, our website that has, we have 3 topics pages. There's one for AT, one for accessible educational materials, as well as UDL. And within those, you would find such things on the AT pages, 15 hours of AAC training. Basically, that's a soup to nuts. What does that look like operationalized in the classroom? That was developed by 2 of our SLPs who are experts on AAC. There's mobility, so we hire a lot of, we contract with experts to develop some resources for us as well as the staff. And so we do, like I said, from the very beginning, a lot of training in technical assistance. A lot of information is just in time as well. This next summer, our AAC series is going to go into back out, and we're hoping to be back out face-to-face. And we'll do face-to-face training. It will be also recorded on AAC and literacy. So that series will be available online in an accessible format as well in about a year. And then another component that I work with is our online, just an important to note, is our online summative assessment, our ISAT. We work with Smarter Balance, and so I work with our students who are blind, our BVI that want to do the live version, and then I work with the school districts for that, and we drop Tiger and Bossers in the school districts for students who are ready to do that in a live format. The important sea change that I wanted you to know is a couple of things, is that in 2016, first of all, I was the friend at the State Department of Ed. Those relationships matter, and you've heard that as everyone has talked. The other component that's important to know, I was on the AT Council. In 2017, I joined Ron's AT Council as the SDE rep. And so I was, as a member of the council, advocating for funding to support them. It was an area of love. I was doing education in it, obviously. And so this was one way that as the AT council member, I was advocating for Ron's program. And the same thing that Dr. Silva does for me is that she advocates and she holds the purse strings, which I think is critically important. And so I wanted to talk about that from a replication strategy perspective, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. So go ahead and go to next slide, and we'll talk about COVID modifications. So our COVID modifications, I told you that our SESTA grant is quite large. We have instructional support as well as behavioral support. We monitor all of the IEPs. We're just getting ready to review the IEPs for the general supervision file review, and I participate in that process. So what we have found with COVID and our supports that we're doing for that is that a lot of that is at a distance. We never did fully shut down with COVID. We continued to have curbside services. We're doing our consultations. I don't call them assessments, I call them consultations. And the reason I call them consultations is because we do some feature matching and some information, provide a report of ideas. The IEP team, as legally required under IDEA, and we're not members of the IEP team, make the decision as to what AT makes sense for that student that they're a child expert on. And then they do their monitoring. What we do is we will give them some ideas. We will leave equipment for them to try, and they'll try it for a period of time. We put it on loan to them, and then when they have purchased what they need, they will give it back. There's also for our LEAs that are rural and don't have a lot of money, we will purchase things that are expensive for like a refreshable braille displays and different types of things that are more expensive, and we'll put it on long-term loan for them because we know they don't have a lot of dollars, and so that helps them out. Like I said, we do curbside, and so all of this is happening. We'll do consultations with Zoom, and then we'll drop ship or mail equipment to individuals. When COVID started, we did drop ship. I did not. We didn't do curbside at the very beginning. We started that a couple of months in, but I would drop ship, work with the LEA and the family, and we would drop ship equipment to the families. Another thing that is COVID related is we will not be having our 17th annual Tools for Life. Remember, I told you that in the previous slide that they did an AT conference, and that became an AT secondary transition in 2004. Well, we will not be doing our 17th annual Tools for Life conference. It's about 350 people who attend. It's student focused. So we usually have about 170, 180 students who attend this. It's a 2-day conference. We bring in keynote speakers, national keynote speakers, and they go out, they stay in a hotel for 2 days, and they go out, they have, just like a regular conference, we have keynotes, and then they do their breakout sessions. And so that we will not do this year. It's in Northern Idaho, and we'll have it in 2022. But instead, we are working on some intermediary activities to support the conference in the future and provide supports for secondary transition students, such as some short digital stories. Next slide. So replication, I think it's always nice to hear about all kinds of activities and things that people do, and then I just kind of slink away thinking, I'm never going to be able to do that. I feel like it always kind of bums me out. But as I've thought about this and I've looked at how we have done this historically, I think the thing that I lean back into is what I'm doing with Idaho Vocational Rehab right now. I have a couple of little, $35,000 contracts from them. And what I'm doing is building those. I have a VR rep on my council. He's not as active in helping with funding, but he's not bad. Their secondary transition coordinator is very engaged in providing funding and support for the AT program. I worked with her at the State Department of Ed, and now she's with VR. And what I'm finding is leaning in with people that I worked with before, as well as my AT council reps from the agencies, that helps. That's helping us find and procure additional funding. I read their state and federal reports from other agencies, their federal reports, so I know what it is that they're doing, as well as what AT supports that they need. I sit on their councils, and I think that helps as well. And so when I go through all of those, when I kind of take in all of that information, when I read their reports, as well as I have my AT council members talk about what they're doing that is specifically focused on assistive technology with their agencies, that also lets me lean in and hear what their needs are. And so that's another way that I can then pitch an idea of what type of supports that could be useful for their agency, or they know we have ideas that can support it. And so those are the ways that I start weaving in the supports and the needs for the other agencies, and try and build that, to replicate and build what we did with education. Are there any questions?
Not seeing any right now, Janice. Just a reminder to everybody, if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat. We'd be happy to address any questions you might have regarding any of the information shared by our three panelists today. So we'll give everybody a couple seconds to see if they have any questions that they would like to add at this time. So Janice, Amy Perron is asking, how many staff members are there on your team?
That's a good question. So I have different types of funding. I have FCC, and I have, of course, our core funding that we have, our State Department of Ed. And so I have specifically focused on our SDE type work. I have one, two and a half that are specific that we focus on AT, but you also need to realize that I also have access to someone who does all of our that are on SESTA, that does all of our web support. They load stuff for us. They help us with the development of just in time. I also have access to someone who does all of our, if we're doing a training, she develops beautiful resources for us to advertise and does all of the advertising. And so it's kind of a big machine. So I peripherally will get a whole lot of support that I would have to have staff otherwise. From an AT staff perspective, I have just parts and pieces of staff, but I supervise 11 people total besides myself.
Any other questions from the participants? Well, not seeing any. On behalf of the AT3 Center, I would like to thank Tobias Orr from the Nebraska State AT Program, and David Baker, Director of the Missouri State AT Program, and Janice Carson, Director of the Idaho State AT Program, for sharing information with us today on how they have established relationships with their state, local education agencies, how they've maintained them, and some suggestions and ideas of how you might be able to reach out and work with the education agencies in your state or territory. Thank you all for participating, and we look forward to our next, oh, sorry, I see a question. Oh, great stuff. Thanks for sharing. Mike Murata. Thank you, Mike. So I invite all of you to keep your eyes open and watch for upcoming AT3 webinars and expect additional announcements as we move through the last month of 2020 and into 2021. Thank you all. Good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.